serious Redditors who have cut family members off from their lives. What was the final straw for you? I had been in the hospital for over a month, nearly dying from a rare disorder. My dad had came and spent time with me almost every day, whereas my mom, not even a phone call. When I finally got out and was at home, I called her to update on what had been going on with me, and she dominated the conversation. She somehow made the entire situation about her and how worried she was, what she would have done if that happened to her, etc. My 2-year-old ran up to me and was hugging my leg, and as I looked down into the eye of my baby, I realized I couldn't even imagine if my baby had just gone through what I did, not visiting, not calling, and making every conversation about me. That was pretty much the last time I ever talked to my mom. My sister had already cut mom from her life, and that moment was when it dawned on me, mom really doesn't care about us. She doesn't actually love us. A loving mother would never have treated their children the way that woman treated us. At least your dad seems to be a good in your life. Overheard her planning to sabotage my vehicle and set me up to get fired from a job, so I would be forced to stay under her roof longer and pay her bills and do all the chores. Duck you, mom. So she was going to get you fired, but she also wanted you to pay her bills. Like, how did she reconcile that? I had 3 jobs at the time. The big one she was trying to sabotage was my main source of savings for my own place. She was smart about it, loaning them $40,000, which I had to borrow to prevent foreclosure of the family farm, after they begged me for months, only to have them pretend it was a gift and making me hire an attorney to get the money back. To make it worse, they even accused me of forging documents, etc. to show it was a loan, trying to ruin my name in the process. Fortunately, they had paid for 4 years, and that was what saved me. My mom texted my husband behind my back and tried to duck him. Ducked up part just from Reddit. This seems to happen way more than it should. I cut off everyone except one sibling when I turned 18. I already knew I wanted to do this by the time I was 16. Mom is a very mentally ill drug addict, and father was a sociopathic pervert. Cut off the rest because I knew they would leak details of my life to said parents. Don't know if any died. Don't care. My life has been very peaceful ever since. You know when people say they wish they could be a kid again? I would never want that. The power and autonomy I have over myself as an adult is invaluable. I cut my uncle out of my life the day my gran died. She had terminal lung cancer in the last 3 months of her life. She lived out in complete agony. My mother and I moved in with her to care for her full time. I was only 18, working, and still in full-time education. It took so much out of me. My uncle didn't offer us a hand once, and when we asked him for help, he was essentially like, "Ooh, no, she smells like piss." In the days leading up to her death, when she was pretty much a vegetable, he finally came round to discuss how her money was going to be handled, demanding he was entitled to more than us because he was the eldest, despite the fact that he was incredibly well off. Didn't do anything to help my gran while she was dying, and the fact my mother and I were essentially living in poverty at the time. All he cared about was her money. It's been 2 years since she died, and all of that stuff is still being sorted out, but I refuse to talk to him now. I hate him. He's such a heartless pig that couldn't even be upset about his mother dying because he was so excited at the prospect of receiving money. Same thing happened to me when grandmother passed. Spent the last 2 years of her life with only me visiting and caring for her while she wasted away from Alzheimer's. But everyone in the family showed up for the funeral I planned alone, and everyone was super pissed when they realized there was no money as the nursing home took it all. My last memory of my aunts and uncles were all of them arguing over a $50 TV I bought her. Went NC, and I've never been happier. Good deal. Nothing destroys a family faster than money. It's kind of disgusting. Years and years of being told I never do anything right by my mother. Some of the highlights: scored 99% on a test and got told I was stupid for forgetting her on a currency equation. Made county finals for wrestling. Got dropped off and asked how long before she had to be back because I'd rather go shopping than stay. Qualified as team alternate for the national championships and had to turn it down because your father and I have plans and I'm not cancelling. My sister was stealing packs of cigarettes for her friends and I took the blame and beating despite none of my friends being smokers or drinkers since we were all doing high level sports. My son was born and she got mad that my wife breastfed because it meant she couldn't bottle feed him. I took the abuse on that one too because I didn't intervene and stop it. That last one did it for me. He's 8 now. Has no idea she exists. It's been almost 7 years. Qualified as team alternate for the national championships and had to turn it down because your father and I have plans and I'm not cancelling. Man, this one hits. When I was 13 my soccer team made the state final. We were a military team, so every year half our team was new, while competing against kids who had been together for 7-8 years. Rather than starting our summer vacation one methodic day later, they made me skip. Wouldn't even consider letting me skip vacation altogether. Our team lost. None of the kids on it ever spoke to me again. Was my fault. I was defensive glue that held team together and wasn't there. Never played soccer again. She's an addict. No amount of love and support from us is going to change that. She has to change by herself, and right now, she doesn't seem to be able to do that. She's lied to us, stolen from us, lied to us some more, and now there is no trust left. She's the only person that I have banned from my home. The final straw was her coming to the house with a friend. Both of them obviously under the influence, and she kept going to the bathroom looking for medication that we were hiding from the last time. She's still pain medication. You're doing the right thing. My mother tried to kill sister's dog. I cut ties with the bitch. When I was 9 my mom told me that she had wanted an abortion with me, but they weren't readily available in 1959. So I was lucky. Over the years it was on off with her. I'd swear her out of my life and then let her back in. I was blamed for everything that was wrong in her life and everyone else's. When I was in my mid-50s she screamed at me on the phone and repeated more than once that she hated me. I told her she wanted an abortion in 1959 and congratulations, you just received your abortion. I now will allow a text here and there, but we don't speak, and I'm totally fine with the situation. My nephew, who was raised more or less as my little brother, stole my deceased father's coin collection from my mother, put it in a co-insta machine, and used the money he got to score heroin. Haven't spoken to him since. I can't. I put up with everything for years and years because a part of me believed that if I ever needed my mom in an emergency, she'd be there. Never had happened before, but I never needed help. An emergency happened. She wasn't there. The equation of our relationship no longer made sense. The final straw was a fist fight with stepmom and stepbrothers all at once. Stepmom said I wasn't welcome to the house anymore. Dad favored his new family over me. He said he'd make an agreement with my mom to skip weekend visits for no child support. I was 16 and I haven't seen, heard from or spoken to him in 29 years. Still don't care to know if he's alive or dead. When my father took a phone call from me and I asked him to please be alone for it, I poured out my heart and soul for 9 minutes. Tears, sobs, tragedy, everything. I hung up and he texted me a few minutes later saying he had put me on speakerphone and the whole family had heard everything. I responded that it was the last thing they would ever hear of me. Keep that end of the bargain. I'm so sorry they did that to you. When my brother finally admitted to molesting my sister and I growing up, and my mother and younger brother picked him and literally blocked me and told every single person in my bloodline that I was trash, so they all blocked me too. Also it wouldn't get out, so they wouldn't know the truth. Like I was about to take out a billboard or something. RIP, I'm an orphan now. My dad stopped talking to me because he found some shit I wrote 40 years ago when I was 10 and pissed off that he abandoned me and my sister. He had come back right around that time, so it wasn't much. I was into spies and covered stuff, so who knows what it was about. He finds it 40 years later, waits until I come over on Father's Day and gets pissed off in front of me and my kids. Yeah, I haven't bothered to contact him again, though I was very careful not to angrily say anything I'll regret. I'm so tired of having to be the adult with my parents. The night before we thought my son was going to die, removal of ventilator, and expected him to pass shortly after, my dad told me how awful of a mother I was. Never talked to him again. It's been 8 years. Technically my mum did the cutting off part, but when I was little my dad kidnapped me and my sibling abroad just to get back at my mum. The mastermind behind it all was his cunt of a mother. I know people throw this word around, but she was a true psychopath. Me and my siblings spent about a year in a house with that bitch, being constantly psychologically and physically abused by her. As my dad drank himself into a coma, my mum eventually got us back, and we never spoke to them since. Sometimes I wonder if she's dead, and think about defacing her grave and pissing on it. My father is a drug addict and a narcissist. My whole childhood had him rarely playing a significant role, and when I did see him, he had every excuse as to why. As I got a little older I started to second guess the context of earlier events, and hear him repeat self-serving lies to people that I knew weren't true. Though he started getting incarcerated, him disappearing for a weekend or even a week at a time was one thing, but him spending weeks or months in rehab or prison was a whole different thing. My mother finally kicked him to the curb, and any of the times I bothered to be around him after that, my mother never discouraged a relationship with him or said a bad word about him. Despite having more than enough reason to, he always tried to act more like a friend than a parent. One of the last times he got arrested and went to prison was for a period of months. I didn't talk to him for a stretch, and then when I did again I told him that if he ever touched another drug then we were done. He would no longer be my father or have any place in my life. Fast forward a few years, and I was just laid off from a job I really enjoyed. I had just walked into my apartment and was basically in tears knowing I had to tell my roommate that I lost my job and had no idea where my rent was going to come from in 10 days. Then I get a phone call from my sister to say that the Ashat had gotten arrested and was going away for 7 years. He had let me down my whole life. He had made his addiction everyone else's fault. He badmouthed his friends, his family, my mother, her family, everybody. He missed every memorable and important event from my childhood. He never paid a cent of child support, so I grew up poor with a single mother trying to pay for herself and 3 kids. He even at least once took some of my stuff and sold it, presumably for drug money. I had overlooked, or at least accepted, all of that. But that news and that gut punch of disappointment on what was already a very bad day was just too much. I told her I didn't care and to let him know not to contact me if when he got out. Unfortunately, he did eventually get out. I sincerely hoped he would just die in prison so he could stop hurting and disappointing my siblings, and has since gotten all kinds of people to feel sorry for him through a mix of his annoyingly effective charisma and also an abundance of lies. But I've held firm in not saying a word to him. He's tried sending me letters, and every one was tossed in a bonfire unopened. He's tried having relatives pass me messages from him, but I informed them quickly that anyone acting as his mouthpiece will get cut from my life as well. And honestly, it feels great. People always say dumb shit like, but he's still your father. You only get one, or you should forgive him for your own sake, but that's all horse shit. The thing I did for my sake was remove the toxic person. It was 100% the right move, and my only regret is that I didn't do it much sooner and save some of the extra heartache. And yeah, you do only get one father. You also only get one gallbladder. And if it starts to become toxic and dangerous to your health, they cut that shit out of your body so you can continue living a healthy and happy life. So moral of the story, don't wait to cut out shitty, toxic people. Do it and don't regret it, because you deserve to be happy without them. I haven't cut off contact with my family, but we don't talk as much anymore. I've always been the black sheep of the family. You realize they just don't like you when you're around by the way they speak to you. My family is very condescending towards my decisions, ways of thinking. Everything I do is wrong in their eyes, and they themselves can do no wrong. Sometimes you just have to realize you will never win over people. even if they're family. It's better to leave in those situations if you find your mental health is far healthier when they are not around. My grandmother on my mom's side. Some background info to explain. When I was in preschool, I can distinctly remember every day after my mom dropped me off, the adults that worked there would take me to a back room and strip me down. They were looking for bruises. Apparently this was in the 80s. I never questioned it or anything till I got older and realized that was strange. In first grade, my grandmother and grandfather picked me up from school. This was strange since they lived in Iowa and I was in Mississippi, and put me in their RV for a joyride which turned out to go on until dark. I remember her telling me to know that she loves me and that she's doing this because I deserve better. Again, did not understand what was going on. I was just excited to be in an RV and not in school. By dark we pulled into a parking lot and my mom and dad pulled me from the RV, put me in the back seat, then talked to them. By talk I remember yelling and such. There are a lot more little things she did, but those two stand out the most. I didn't find out anything about why these things happened until my grandfather died, and I asked why we weren't going to the funeral. The grandfather wasn't my mom's dad. He was husband number 6. I believe my mom explained to me that my grandmother hated her for divorcing a doctor and then getting married to a man and living in dirty Mississippi. She felt my mom's horrible decision to do this meant that, in my grandmother's eyes, my mom was not fit to take care of me and that she could do better. Apparently the reason for what they did to me in preschool was because my grandmother had called them and told them my mother was abusing me. So they were looking for evidence, I guess. I have no idea how my parents were able to get me back from the grandparents, and have no way really of finding out all the details since my mom passed away last year and my dad has and still is having cluster strokes, so his memory and speech patterns are not reliable. My son got his back sliced when he fell off a landscaping wall in their backyard. Found out they didn't watch him at all, so he sat in their backyard crying, freaking out, and bleeding until they brought him back to our house. Didn't even notice or care that something was wrong with him. They just dropped him off. I immediately helped my son with medicine and bandaged him up. Left him to my wife to care for. Then went to my parents' house to show what had happened with pictures and yell at them. They denied any fault for what happened and tried to say he was like that before he came over. I told them they are not allowed to see my kids unless it's at my house when I allow them to be there. They were all up in arms about that, saying I'm using the kids against them and trying to manipulate them. To which I responded, I don't trust you with my kids. You neglected them and one got severely hurt. There will not be a next time, as there shouldn't have been a this time. I'm not using them, I'm advocating for them. And I'm not letting them stay in the care of people who let one be injured, crying and bleeding alone with no one to care for him. I'm not being manipulative, you're being neglectful and entitled. And if you don't see a problem with your actions, then I'm not interested in having you in our lives anymore. Haven't talked since. Some of my cousins, because they lied to my mother regarding a musical instrument of mine that they decided to steal. The truth of the matter is, if they asked, I would have sold it to them pretty cheap. But the lying and taking it without my permission is the kicker. The sad thing is that I'm one of the few family members that was on their side, or at least would hear them out, as they are considered black sheep of the family by other family members and looked down upon. They essentially burned their last bridge within our family. I've still yet to receive an apology 5 years later. Sister caused issues out of thin air, and then when challenged about it, she lied through her teeth and tried to get family on side. She had then done this on 2 occasions with a girlfriend I recently split up with because of these reasons. She failed miserably as she was found out, but it still cost me a good relationship. It's one thing causing drama, but to cause me drama and interfere in my relationship just hammers the nail in the coffin for me. It makes it worse that she openly admitted to me that part of the reason she caused an issue is because I wasn't speaking to her. So my thoughts were that it was the dumbest thing you can do to build a relationship with someone. It's the exact opposite of building bridges.